Welcome to this build and flight review for the 49-inch wingspan Diamond Demon, a lovely 1930s vintage model. And what you see here, the finished plane, is the culmination of a build series with about 20 videos, quite detailed. And if you haven't seen these, have a look in the description below this video and there'll be a link to the playlist for all of those videos, and you can watch them at leisure. So I've built the plane, obviously here it is, and I've flown it, and so it's still in one piece. So I thought it'd be good to talk about my experience with actually building it and what I learned from flying it. Well, to start with, the plane was built from a set of plans from Ben Buckle. Now you can get plans from AutoZone, which are quite good, but I saw the Ben Buckle plans and I just thought they had a little bit more detailed and were a little bit better. And Ben Buckle provides an excellent service, really good prices for the plans, and the postage is quite cheap. So for me it was a no-brainer really. And I'm really pleased in hindsight that I did choose those plans. And the plans are really good. There's a couple of little issues with just some of the formers being varying sizes when they should be constant, and the terminal ribs perhaps needed to be a little bit longer on the plans. But when you consider these are vintage plans, I was really pleased, and everything was there that I needed to be able to build this. You obviously need to think and transfer it from that 2D plan into 3D in your mind, and how you're going to do it. And I did make a few modifications and slight changes, but essentially the plans were excellent. Now onto the build. As you can see, this has got a Bantam 19 spark ignition engine in the front, and I really wanted to build this as spark ignition. But after I'd started, it did concern me, and I did feel quite anxious about the fact that I'm building a relatively small plane, which is made even more smaller by the diamond-shaped fuselage. And I was concerned at how I was going to get all of the electronics in there, because we've not only got the radio system to get in. This is 2-channel radio assist, so it's got the rudder and a single elevator just on that side, so it's got 2 servos. It's got the battery in the radio and a switch, but it's also got a separate battery for the spark ignition system and a coil and some electronics. So actually half the weight of this plane is taken up with the electronics. It's amazing really. And I was concerned how that would fit in, and it took a little bit of thought to actually get that right and to get a lot of the weight up front. But we managed to do that, and we came up with some good solutions, I think, to get the radio gear separate from the ignition system and also get that weight forward. Having the diamond shape like this made it a beautiful build. It was really interesting, and it's based on a crutch design, as many of these old planes were, where you start off with 2 pieces of balsa that form a crutch, and everything is built either up or down from there. But there were no major issues with the build. The wings are absolutely lovely, with the really sweet undercamber on the underside. The covering went well. Although, if you've seen the covering videos, just doing this little bit here where you've got a bit of a transition, a bit of a strange curve, that nearly drove me to distraction, but everything else was great. And I would highly recommend this build. I mean, I chose the lightest of balsa for the tailplane, and after I'd built the tailplane I was concerned because it was very flexible and it didn't feel strong enough, and I thought I'm only going to catch that and it's going to break. But once I'd got the actual covering material on, this is covered in laminating film and Japanese asuka tissue, once I'd got that on, it really stiffened this up. I mean, it still flexes, it's still light, but it really added some strength to it, which was great. So I can highly recommend the building of this plane. So now let's talk about how it flew, and I've got a couple of notes just on my iPad here if you see me just looking down for some guidance. I just don't want to miss anything. The maiden flight went really well, but if you've seen the maiden flight, it curves around with the torque of the engine to the left, and so I ended up putting a little bit of right thrust into it, and that counteracted that. Not much, just a little bit more. I think the down thrust I kept the same, and I did alter the CG. We got the CG just right as it was specified on the plans, but I ended up putting about, I think it was about 20 grams of lead right up in the nose here, just to increase that nose weight, and it just improved the glide a little bit. I think it did benefit from that. Now let me just have a quick look on here. Oh, I was really keen to get some elastic bands that weren't bright white or cream, and so I got these really nice black elastic bands, which I think really help kind of the look of it. But I didn't appreciate until I actually ran this that they're not fuel proof, and there's a bit of a dye in them that runs out. But luckily, once you've run the plane once, the dye kind of comes out and it runs down the fuselage, but it doesn't stain the tissue. The covering on this is still good. So you just wipe it off, use them again, and they're fine. But it was a bit disconcerting at first to see that colour running down the newly covered fuselage. So now I said earlier that it had a single elevator, and we can see that there just on the left hand side. I was a little bit concerned when I was building this because I've never flown a plane with just a single elevator. And I had spoken to people and they said, no, it's fine, it's fine. Somebody with a Land bomber messaged me and said, yeah, it's fine, you don't notice. And he was spot on. Absolutely true. I don't notice at all whether it's got a single elevator when I'm flying it or whether it's a double. It just flies lovely and it's very responsive. Now with the fin, just turn it round, you can see I got a 4.5 gram servo in the back here to operate the rudder. That was a really good, smart move, I think, when I was building this. It made the linkages so much easier. We kind of balanced the weight. Okay, I did add a little bit of extra lead, but essentially this worked out really well. But this, along with other vintage models I've got, you need to have dual rates on the throws, or you need to have a lot of throws for when the engine stops. So I generally fly this with a fairly small throw on the rudder until the engine cuts, or I cut the engine, and then I increase the throws. And I think it's partially because you haven't got the forced air over the control surface, but also with the keel on the bottom here just helps keep it on a steady flight, and so you just need that extra little bit of movement there to help with that. Now I said earlier, or just about whether when the engine cuts or I cut the engine. If you've seen the build videos, one of the videos is change and modification, where I take out what was going to be I think it's 2 ounce fuel tank in the fuselage. I had real concerns when I was fitting that because I kept thinking that if I have a problem and I lose control of this is going to be 20 miles away on that fuel tank probably before it runs out of fuel. So there was a concern there. And so I took out the tank and I put in the standard small Bantam tank, which is, you can't see the tank, but it's just under the engine there, just under the Venturi. And that gives me, I think it's about 2 minutes of flight, which is absolutely ample. because with these vintage models, they're essentially powered gliders in a way. You get them up as high as you can, the engine cuts or you cut the engine, and hopefully you can find a thermal or you just glide them down. So short engine runs are ideal, and that tank is perfect. It was a really good decision to put that in. It not only gave me the extra space in the cabin for the electronics, but it took away that risk of a flyaway further than it need be, and it just makes it a lot smoother, a lot easier build. Now, what else have I got on my list? Oh yes, the engine. So the engine is, I would say, absolutely perfectly suited to this model. On the Maiden I had it about 70%, I think it was, of the power. You can control the RPM with the ignition timing, so you can slow it down or speed it up. And I was about 70%, and that was fine. Now I fly this on full speed, which is still only, I think, about 7,500 RPM. These older engines are a lot lower revving than more modern engines. But I would say the power for this is suited perfectly. It couldn't be better. I am really pleased. That was another concern I had, that the engine might be overpowered, because you know, being a 19 size engine in a small model. But actually, it's excellent. It's really good. One thing I would say about the engine is the HT lead comes out this side of the cabin, and I cut a slot in the cabin so it fits under the wing without lifting the wing up. In hindsight, it would have been better coming out this side, and I'll tell you the reason why. When you're adjusting the timing, points timing, ignition timing, then if you're not careful, when you're trying to avoid the propeller, you can just put your side of your thumb onto the top of the spark plug, the HT lead here, and you just do get a little bit of a shock. It's no big deal, it doesn't hurt, but it does slow the engine down a little bit because it affects the ignition. But it would have been better on this side, perhaps just away from the hand, although I did put on a little bit of a boot here, because I think it was when it was further round without a boot that I was catching it. But that boot that I put on has made all the difference. Now I think that is essentially it regarding the flying. The undercamber, where I put on the laminating film and the tissue, it has come off on a couple of the ribs yeah, it's on the right hand side. I don't know whether that shows up. It doesn't, I don't notice a difference with the flying, to be honest. It still seems to fly just as well. And I think part of the problem was that it got quite hot, and I don't think I'd got a breather hole in the covering. I've done one now on the underside where the cabin is. I've put a hole in, and there's holes in all the ribs anyway from where I made them. So now any expansion of air can leave the wing, and I think maybe because it got hot it blew up a little bit, and it just put a bit of pressure on those ribs, which was quite disappointing when it happened. But as I say, it doesn't seem to make any difference. It might be that if I put on some kind of glue on the underside, like PVA, and then put the laminating film on with a hot iron like I did, maybe it'll stick a little bit better. I mean, the last time I flew this was only a few days ago, and I've flown this quite a lot. I actually got up in a thermal, and I was quite concerned that because it just stayed up and then started getting higher and higher, and I ended up bringing it down on full elevator after it had been up there quite a long time, and it was getting smaller and smaller, and it really was just thermally. I mean, this bird flies absolutely beautifully. It lands lovely, it goes up lovely, and it stays up there when it's up there. I mean, what more could you want from a lovely vintage model like this? So I hope that, I mean, that's kind of an overview of the build and the flying, and I have really enjoyed the whole experience of this plane, and it really is now my favourite plane. Not just because it's got that lovely spark ignition, but it's just the whole shape. I love the colour scheme and the tissue, and it flies. You couldn't ask for a better flying plane really for this kind of vintage model. So anyway, I hope you found this kind of review useful, and if you're in two minds, all I can say about building a Diamond Demon like this, you really should get out there and do them, because they are fantastic planes and a joy to build. So anyway, thanks very much for watching, and expect to see more flights from this Diamond Demon. Thanks very much.